My name is Kristi Cheng, and I currently work as a dietitian at the Adult Cystic Fibrosis Clinic at the University of California, San Francisco. Our topic today is to discuss the changing landscape of nutrition for people with cystic fibrosis or CF. Our objectives are to describe how highly effective modulator therapy has changed nutrition for people with CF, to identify dietary patterns associated with healthy aging, and to explore practical ways to support healthy eating. So historically, people with CF have suffered a shortened lifespan. However, with the emphasis on multidisciplinary care and highly effective modulator therapy, people with CF are living longer. This is data taken from the latest Cystic Fibrosis Foundation patient registry highlights. You can see here that the number of people with CF over the age of 50 has increased by almost tenfold in the last 20 years. And among people with CF born between 2020 to 2024, half are predicted to live to age 65 or beyond. And this is really amazing. It's something that was once rare in the CF community, but with greater life expectancy, there is an increased risk for developing age-related chronic diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. Studies have shown an increased risk for dyslipidemia, which is abnormal levels of fats in the blood, like cholesterol and triglycerides, in people with CF, regardless of their pancreatic deficiency status. There's also an increased risk for cancer, particularly colorectal cancer, for various reasons. One of them being that the CFTR protein functions as a tumor suppressor gene. So with mutations in the CFTR gene causing cystic fibrosis, this does increase the risk for cancer. Although some of this may be offset by modulator therapies that restore at least some function to the protein. Still, there are other factors that could increase the risk of cancer, including CF-related systemic and bowel inflammation. We know that there are changes in the gut microbiome for CF patients, and the historic high-fat, low-fiber diet. If we look at the nutrition status of people with CF in the last 20 years, we can also see an increase in body size based on the classification of body mass index, or BMI. This is also from the latest patient registry highlights, and we can see that the percentage of people with CF who are overweight or obese has increased by 2 to 3-fold in the last 20 years. For people with CF who are overweight, they have higher rates of dyslipidemia and hypertension or high blood pressure than their normal weight peers. In addition, this increase in fat mass is associated with insulin resistance, so that can also increase the risk for CF-related diabetes. Even for normal weight people with CF based on the BMI classifications, there has been an increase in normal weight obesity, which is an increase in body fat despite normal BMI. And this has been linked to worse lung function and increased cardiometabolic risks. Since people with CF are living longer, what do we know about diet and risk for chronic diseases for those with CF? Limited. There are currently no large, high-quality clinical studies that examine the impact of dietary patterns on the risk of chronic diseases and cancer, such as colorectal cancer in people with CF. There are a lot of ongoing studies, so we'll have to wait for results. Some studies suggest that higher intake of added sugars is associated with increased fat in the abdominal area and glucose fluctuations. And another study showed that whole foods-based diet in children with CF has been associated with an improvement in GI symptoms and reduced fecal calprotectin, which is a measure of inflammation. So extrapolating from the general population, reviews and expert consensus suggest that diets that are higher in fiber, whole grains, and resistant starch can be protective against intestinal inflammation and potentially reduce cancer risk. Since research in CF population is limited, what about diet and healthy aging in the general population? An article that was published in May of this year examining dietary patterns with healthy aging used longitudinal data from the Nurses' Health Study and the Health Professionals Follow-Up Study. And there were over 100,000 participants with a 30-year follow-up. There were 8 different dietary patterns, and these were associated with survival to 70 years of age, being free of 11 chronic diseases, including most cancers, diabetes, and heart disease, and they had higher rates of having intact mental, cognitive, and physical health. And the 8 dietary patterns are listed here, and they all had similar principles, suggesting that from their abstract, I quote, Higher intakes of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, unsaturated fats, nuts, legumes, and low-fat dairy products were linked to greater odds of healthy aging, meaning that if we ate more of those foods, they were associated with a higher chance of healthy aging. Whereas higher intakes of trans fats, sodium, sugary beverages, and red or processed meats, or both, were inversely related. So I picked two of the dietary patterns to go over, the Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. First, the Mediterranean dietary pattern. This is followed by people who live in the Mediterranean countries like Greece and Italy, and the diet is typically high in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and extra virgin olive oil. They eat at least 3 servings a week of fish and seafood, nuts and seeds, and beans and lentils. There's some limitations on poultry, eggs, low-fat dairy products to 1 serving a day, and limiting red meat and sweets to 1 serving a week. The photo on the right shows items that are part of the Mediterranean diet by food group. The second diet is the DASH diet, and it stands for Dietary Approaches to Stopping Hypertension, and it was originally designed to lower blood pressure and has been proven to be a balanced eating lifestyle. It does emphasize foods that are rich in nutrients like magnesium, potassium, and calcium, which help to lower blood pressure. And you can see on the slide that their core principles here are very similar to the Mediterranean diet. With regards to these healthy dietary patterns, 2 nutrients keep coming up. So we have healthy fats and dietary fiber. Healthy fats are unsaturated, and we'll talk about this in some more detail in the next slide. And fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and legumes are important sources of dietary fiber. And we know that fiber has an important role in improving gastrointestinal health, helps lower cholesterol, and also helps control blood sugar levels, which are all helpful in lowering risk for chronic diseases that we've been discussing, like gastric cancers, heart disease, and diabetes. In addition, recent observational studies suggest that increasing fiber intake to recommended levels does not increase the risk of constipation or distal intestinal obstruction syndrome in people with CF. So if we take a deeper look into fats, the healthy fats are unsaturated, which can be broken down into mono and polyunsaturated fats. And these are liquid at room temperature, like your plant oils, like olive oil. Other healthy fats include nuts and seeds, fish and seafood, avocados, and soy products. Particularly, omega-3s have been shown to reduce inflammation and improve cholesterol levels. So examples of omega-3 fats include fatty fish like salmon, mackerel, tuna, and sardines, and also vegetarian sources like walnuts, chia seeds, and flax seeds. On the other hand, the fats that should be limited are saturated fats, hydrogenated fats, and trans fats. These are solid at room temperature. An easy way that helps me to remember is that if the fat is solid at room temperature, it will be solid in my bloodstream, which blocks the flow of blood and increases the risk of heart disease. Some examples of these are full-fat dairy products, meat fats, tropical oils like coconut oil, and very processed goods like Hostess Twinkies. Another name for hydrogenated fats is trans fats. Here is a nutrition facts label and ingredients list for Twinkies. The label will always say 0 grams of trans fat, since there is a ban on trans fats after they discovered how much it was contributing to heart disease. But there is a caveat. Manufacturers can still write 0 grams of trans fat as long as the product contains less than half a gram of trans fat. So the only way to figure out if there are trans fats in the product is to check the ingredients list for the words partially or fully hydrogenated oils. And you can see here that there is indeed hydrogenated oils or trans fats in Twinkies. These optimal dietary patterns for healthy aging are in contrast with the CF legacy diet, also known as the McDonald's diet. Prior to modulator therapy, it was well established that higher BMIs correlated with more improved lung function. So there was this emphasis to gain weight through high energy and high fat diets. The focus was historically on meeting calorie needs rather than diet quality. Studies have shown that people with CF have higher intakes of saturated fats and added sugars, as shown by the picture here, and lower intakes of fruits, vegetables, greens, and legumes. We've already talked about the importance of increasing fiber and healthy fats in the diet, so now let's shift to added sugars, as that is also typical of the legacy CF diet. In the study about optimal dietary patterns for healthy aging, they recommended to reduce sugary beverages. So what are the guidelines for intake of added sugars in the general population? The dietary guidelines of Americans recommend that added sugars should be less than 10% of your total calorie intake for ages 2 and up. And then for children who are under 2, added sugars should be avoided. The American Heart Association further recommends that intake of added sugars for women should be less than 25 grams per day, and for men, less than 38 grams per day. This is based on strong evidence that links excess added sugar intake to increased risks for obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and certain cancers in the general population. So let's take a look at some common beverages and how much sugar it contains. And for reference, a sugar cube contains 4 grams of sugar. So this first drink here is a 16-ounce bottle, all-natural Snapple raspberry tea. It sounds healthy since it's a tea, but it does contain 36 grams of sugar, which is equivalent to 9 sugar cubes. Second drink here is our classic Western drink, Coca-Cola. This one is a 12-ounce can, and it contains 39 grams of sugar, so about 10 sugar cubes. The next drink is a Starbucks caramel frappuccino at the smaller size of a tall, which is 12 ounces, and it contains 11 and a half cubes of sugar. And the last drink is our small McDonald's vanilla shake. It contains a total of 51 grams of total sugar, which is almost 13 sugar cubes. So all of these drinks are above the daily limit of added sugars that were discussed in the previous slide. So putting it all together, now that we've discussed the core principles of healthy dietary patterns associated with healthy aging in the general population, how can we put this in practice for people with CF? So here are some examples of healthy substitutes in place of a legacy CF item that you can consider. For the McDonald's shake that we just discussed, you can make a smoothie with heart-healthy ingredients like Greek yogurt, nut butters like peanut butter, almond butter, berries, banana, and flax seeds. And this substitution has more protein, fiber, omega-3 fats, vitamins, and minerals while decreasing our saturated fats and added sugars. For French fries, try roasted sweet potatoes with olive oil and herbs. And this substitution is higher in fiber, potassium, and healthy fats. For a cheeseburger, try a grilled salmon or turkey burger on a whole grain bun with avocado. And this one is going to be higher in lean protein, omega-3 fats, fiber, and other healthy fats. Other substitutions, so instead of a soda sweetened with sugar, you can try flavored sparkling water or adding fruit to sparkling water. Instead of potato chips, try mixed nuts and seeds for more healthy fats, protein, fiber, and magnesium. And finally, instead of ice cream, try making ice cream with a very ripe frozen banana. You can blend it with cocoa powder and nut butters. And this one has more fiber, potassium, and healthy fats while reducing added sugars. Besides knowing which are healthier substitutes, I also want to acknowledge that there are other considerations regarding changing eating habits. Change is not easy. For some, there are factors that might be beyond one's control, such as food insecurity. It can also be challenging to purchase healthy food items, especially if we're living in a food desert. There are also skills needed, such as learning how to cook in general, and then learning how to cook foods that some people are not used to eating while they're growing up. You may also need to start reading nutrition labels when you're shopping, and that's also another skill to learn too. And we also need to adapt this to different cultures and ethnic foods. There's also an emotional tie to eating for many people with CF. For some of my patients, they've shared that there were a lot of things they couldn't do because of CF, but eating was the one thing that they could control and do whatever they want. Now having to adapt to a new dietary pattern at later ages can be very difficult. Body image is another important topic. People with CF dealt with body image concerns pre-modulators, mostly centered around low body weight, but now having to shift towards larger body sizes post-modulators can be very challenging both mentally and physically. These are all reasons why continuing to work with your multidisciplinary team to navigate all aspects of healthy lifestyle, including optimal dietary patterns to promote healthy aging, is really important. And also, change takes time, so take it step by step. There are resources out there to support you. You can check with your dietitian, your social worker, mental health coordinator, or any member of the multidisciplinary team. And some upcoming resources include the following. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is hosting virtual cooking classes for families. There is one coming up next Thursday. You can also watch previous classes on the website listed. There's also an ongoing collection of recipes from the CF community to create a cookbook called Eat Healthy for CF. When the campaign ends later this year, CF centers will receive an electronic company that can be shared with all people with CF and their families. Before the conclusion, I want to note that there are many other topics related to aging that we didn't have time to cover, like bone health, hormonal changes, dementia, and mental health. You can check out this year's NACFC Plenary 2, which also includes great information on the importance of exercise and longevity. We also did not cover other aspects of nutrition guidelines post-modulators like enzymes, salt, and vitamins and minerals. Ultimately, nutrition guidelines are shifting to becoming more individualized, and your nutrition recommendations may be different from what was discussed here, especially if you're not on modulator therapy. So it's important to talk with your team for your individual nutrition recommendations and to see how the team can best support you. So in conclusion, with longer life expectancy, people with CF are at risk for chronic diseases, including cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, and cancer. And nutrition guidelines are shifting from the legacy CF diet to one that emphasizes healthy and nutrient-dense foods such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, healthy fats, nuts, and legumes. And also remember to work with your team to navigate healthy living with CF.